Today I'm going to walk you through my method that I teach at churches to get their sound check done for both front of house and all the monitor mixes. Hey, if we haven't met yet, my name is James and I help church sound techs, worship leaders, and tech directors eliminate the mystery and frustration of sound at church. So if that's you, you found the right place, hit that subscribe button and welcome to the club of sound ninjas. Now before we sound check, we actually have to line check. And this just makes sure that all the instruments that are plugged in are getting to the soundboard. There's no extra noise, nothing's broken. We've verified that everything works before we get everybody in their place and start to build a mix. If you're by yourself, an iPad is very handy for this so that you can plug in a known working device like a Shure SM57 into each one of the mic lines and tap on it to make sure that it's getting to your console. You can do this before the band arrives so that when they get there, they know that their mic line works. That way, if their instrument doesn't work, it might be before the mic line that's coming to the soundboard. So you can test for their dead batteries or their bad cables in their pedal board and make sure that some of those variables are eliminated before you get started. As people do come and get plugged in, do a quick test to hear their instrument and make sure that you've got the gain set in the general ballpark that you want it. It doesn't have to be fine-tuned when you plug it in and get it going. Just make sure that it's not something out of control loud or way too quiet. As the band is getting set up and getting their in-ear monitors plugged in and getting connected on their phone to the console or using their personal monitor mixers, I recommend that they turn up the crowd mics first. This helps reduce the temptation to take one in-ear monitor out, which can help them feel more connected to the room, but leaves their mix lacking stereo panning, and it also could potentially damage their hearing if they're not careful. Your brain averages the levels that it hears from both ears. So if one ear is really loud, but the other one isn't, it will just take an average of that. While one could be damaging your hearing, you wouldn't really know it because the alarm bells won't be going off in your brain. Crowd mics can help eliminate that glass wall feeling that musicians and singers sometimes get when they're on stage and the lights are bright and they can't see if anybody's actually engaging. It helps to have just a little bit of ambience in there. But one pro tip is to put the high pass filter on these crowd mics so it doesn't just add a bunch of rumble and noise. And the more you use the high pass filter, the less the PA sound comes through those crowd mics as well. I also coach people to keep their in-ear monitors quiet, but if you want a full tutorial on that, I'll throw a link to that video down in the description below or maybe in a card up here. After everybody's plugged in and you've verified that things are working, I have the worship leader start by playing a well-known song and we loop the chorus. Now the first time you do this, it's going to take a little bit more time than it will after you get this system down. So if it feels like you're repeating this chorus forever, don't worry. In the future, this process takes about 2 or 3 minutes to get through everyone, and then you can get on to everything else that you want to do in your service. Picking a well-known song is helpful because you don't have to think about what the chords are. We're not trying to learn something new or figure out parts. Everybody knows what they should play because they've probably already played it 100 times. The reason we choose a chorus is because we want to keep the levels medium-high. We don't want people blowing out their voices during sound check, but we also want to make sure that we're setting our preamp and all the settings on our board for the near maximum level that they might give us during the service. This helps us set what's called headroom, or the amount of level that we have as a buffer between our normal operating level and where the console is going to clip and distort. Before the band starts, if you're on the soundboard, you need to know what your targets are or where you should set the levels and the loudness for both the settings on the board and how loud it should be in the room. At this point, there's basically 3 places to turn it up and turn it down. There's the master fader, which is the overall level for everything, and I recommend keeping this around 0 unless your speaker are way too loud, then you can tuck that down to -5 or -10, but honestly, doing something else to fix that problem is best. But at this point, we're trying to get the band started. We might just need to keep that master fader at -5 to start. Although 0 is the best place, but that's beyond the scope of this video. We're just trying to get through sound check. The other 2 places where we turn up and down our individual instruments and inputs is with the preamp and the fader. The fader is the overall level that's sent to the master bus, while the preamp allows us to get that level that's coming into our console. At whatever level's coming in, we balance all of those so that they're at a good operating level for our equipment and it can become well balanced wherever else we would need to send it. If the preamp or gain is set too low, people in their monitor mixers will have to turn that signal all the way up to try to get enough to make it loud enough for them. The other thing that happens with our preamp too low is that we're going to end up pushing our faders up above 0 to get enough level going to the main mix. With less expensive equipment or older analog gear, this also might mean that noise becomes a problem. But with digital gear, noise is less of an issue, but it's still best practice to get a good healthy signal level, and often this means where the signal is going from green to yellow. So if you're just a color person, you're not a numbers person, green to yellow is a good spot to live for your near maximum signal level coming from any given input. If the preamp level is too high, we're going to be tempted to keep our fader level too low. And the problem with that is that our fader scale is logarithmic, which means that right around 0, we have the most fine tuning control for getting our inputs balanced and making little adjustments to fine tune our mix. Down near -20 or -30, that fine tuning goes away. So a millimeter moved down there might be 2 or 3 decibels, whereas a millimeter of movement right around 0 might mean half a decibel. So if you're the sound tech, as each person plays, if you push up that fader and you're somewhere between -10 and 0 and that level feels comfortable, then you're in a good spot. If it's outside of those, make an adjustment to your preamp to get that fader level right around, say, -10 to 0, or even better, between -5 and 0. After you've set your preamp initially, don't mess with it again unless you give everybody a heads up. Because while you're building your front of house mix, the musicians on stage are building their monitor mixes, and the preamp will affect everything that they hear. It's kind of like a fire hydrant that's feeding a lot of drinking fountains, and if you crank up the pressure on that fire hydrant after somebody has their thumb pushed down just the right level, it could spray water in their face and then they won't be very happy with you. If you have to adjust the preamp, do it between songs during rehearsal and make sure that you get in the talkback mic and give everybody a heads up. You can say something like, "Hey everybody, I need a little bit more gain on the bass, so I'm going to be turning that up." Make sure you adjust your monitor mixes to compensate. This way everybody can make those changes, they don't get blown away, and now you've got better gain on your bass so it can thump. Okay, we've talked about a lot of technical stuff so far, but let's get into the process of how the rest of the band is going to operate with this. We're going to start with the primary instrument and the worship leader. If the worship leader is not playing and singing, choose the instrument that you would have in that arrangement if everything else dropped out. If we just brought it down to one instrument and a vocal at the very end, that's the instrument that you want to keep, and we call that our primary instrument. Or that's the instrument that would take up the most space in the mix while it's big. Getting the balance of these two inputs right is essential, but you have to use a little bit of your imagination while you're doing it. Often when we get behind the console and we have all the controls in front of us, we forget what it should sound like, or we second guess, is this too loud or is this too quiet? And I get a little bit timid in where I put those faders because I don't want to blow anybody away, but I also don't want it to be too quiet, so I don't know what to do. So close your eyes and imagine that person playing and singing in a living room with a group of people leading worship. What level would that be for the loudness that they're playing and singing at? Then try to make your faders match that, and that can be your starting place for how you build your mix. Everything else that we add in from here is going to build around this relationship, so don't be afraid to take 30 seconds or so to really dial this in and make sure that things are feeling right. Often if we leave things feeling weird for too long, our brain normalizes it and then we never come back to fix it. So take the time, get it right early on, and you will be thankful as you build the rest of your mix. Now after the worship leader has played through the chorus, you've got that dialed in, ask the bass guitarist to start playing too, and we're going to add that into the mix. The bass guitar should add an extra octave below our primary instrument and really fill it up. This is also where we decide how much bass or how full we want our mix to be. That's going to depend fully on what's right for your congregation, and so deciding that early on is going to be helpful for you so that you make that decision and build everything else around it, rather than layering in all your guitars and keyboards and then trying to shove the bass on top of it, and now suddenly somebody's pacemaker has gone off because you thumped it too much. After you have the bass guitar set, now we can have our drummer start. We're going to add the drums one drum at a time if we can, and if we have a drum mix that's coming from the entire brain of our electronic drums, we're just going to turn up the drums and make them balance things from on stage if we need them to. The goal here is we're going to make the kick drum balance the bass guitar. And the kick drum should be the punch, while the bass guitar should be the sustain. If there's too much or too little of one or the other, the groove doesn't really lock in. And this is one of the reasons why I end a lot of my videos saying it's all about the low end. Because when you get that right, everything else falls into place. So if you can get good punch from your kick drum, and get good sustain out of your bass, you can actually mix much louder without it feeling as loud because there's the support there from the low end. After we've gotten our kick drum established, we can mix in the snare drum. And the snare drum is the backbeat while the kick drum is the downbeat. Getting this balanced right makes the groove lock in. And so don't be afraid to use your feelers rather than just your thinking brain to get this snare drum level right. You can take a few seconds to practice a little bit by pushing that snare drum too far out in front and then tucking it too far in back and feel how the groove kind of loses its way. Then when you find that Goldilocks spot of just right, you'll know that you've got that balanced really well. Next, I tell people to turn up the cymbals or the overheads, and we just need a little bit of this. Very often the cymbals can be bashed on and the drummer might be holding back during rehearsal but then get really excited during the service. So you want to leave a little bit of room for this to get louder and not set it too loud in the initial mix. Now you might think that I would tell you to do the toms next, but I'm going to have you come back to those at the end because we're trying to build a mix quickly and sometimes the beat that they're playing doesn't include toms. So we might have them come back and play a tom beat later just to make sure that our toms are matching our snare drum and that we get those fills nice and big. Now that we've built the foundation of our mix, we can start to build in everything else, but there's a method that I need you to follow while you're doing this, and that's to avoid the problem of ratcheting. Ratcheting is when we turn up one instrument and then we turn up another instrument till it's above that, and then the third instrument goes above that, and then the fourth instrument goes above that, and now we can't hear the first instrument. So we turn that up, and now that gets on top of that. And now we turn up the second one again because it got buried, and it goes on and on and on until your mix is out of control and you don't have any room left on your faders to turn things up. If that's happened to you, type ratchet down in the comments below. To avoid this, we started with our primary instrument on purpose, the instrument that needs to feel biggest in the mix for this particular song. So as we're turning up our other instruments, we turn it up till we can identify it, and then we pull it back till it's just behind that primary instrument. Doing this does two things. First, it keeps us from ratcheting, but it also makes us leave room for the lead vocal or the worship leader that's singing in that moment. Nobody else brought a bass guitar or an electric guitar or an acoustic guitar to church to play along with the band. They brought their voice, and that's what they follow. So we need to make sure that the voice is the main thing that people hear and that nothing else gets in the way of that. Often we can turn up drums and bass because they don't compete directly with the vocal in their either time domain or frequency domain, so we can have a lot of that. But if we start pushing up electric guitars and synth pads and second pianos over the vocal, that gets to be a problem. So as we're turning up each thing and then we tuck it back, we turn up another thing and then we tuck it back, this builds our mix and we can get things in shape. Now you should have a pretty solid mix and the foundations of a great mix. Now I haven't told you to turn up the background vocals yet because at this point they've been building their monitor mix, they've been adding things one at a time, and now they have their timing reference, their pitch reference, and themselves to be able to turn themselves up and hear themselves in their monitor, get dialed in, and they need to be making sure that they're breathing right, they're projecting before they put the microphone up to their mouth. After all the instruments are in, let them have a few minutes to get warmed up, make sure that they're projecting well, and then they bring up the microphone to their mouth, do a quick gain adjustment to make sure that you're hitting that green to yellow range, and then they can start to turn themselves up and hear themselves in the right context of the rest of the band and all of those pitch and timing references. Remember that singers don't always fully warm up before they get to rehearsal, especially if it's an early morning one and they're not normally early morning people. There can be a huge difference between the level of your singers at 7:30 a.m. versus 10 a.m. So just watch out for that, and if they sound a little bit dull or they're not projecting quite enough, if you've known that they've really projected well during service before, just leave a little bit of room, allow them to get fully warmed up, and then you can finish dialing things in. Again, if you need to make a preamp adjustment, warn everybody before you start turning that up or down. Also, after you've mixed in all of your instruments, double check the level of your lead vocal. What worked well when it was just one instrument and a vocal might not be quite enough level after everybody else is in and there's a lot more energy coming from the band. Again, you shouldn't have to turn it up too much, but maybe just a little nudge up is going to be enough. After you've gotten through this whole process, we've been a little bit myopic, or we've kind of taken a microscope to say this level relationship versus this level relationship versus this level relationship, which is great for fine tuning and getting the band locked in together. But sometimes we can lose the big picture of how the mix sounds overall. So at this point, I often recommend that sound techs get up, leave the sound booth, and go walk around the room. If you need a minute, maybe even walk out of the room, go get a drink of water or a cup of coffee, and walk back in with fresh ears and pay attention to your initial gut instincts. Is this too loud or too harsh in certain parts of the room? Do I need to make an adjustment where one instrument comes down or comes up a little bit more based on how it sounds different in the sound booth? Walking away from the console and not having all the controls at your fingertips allows you to get a better idea of what it's like for everybody else that's not in the comfort and safety of the sound booth. And yes, as an introvert, I often like having my little protective barrier all around me, but we've got to get around that. And during sound check, there shouldn't be many other people in the room anyway. And by the way, after everybody gets all this and we've gone through and everybody's kind of been mixed into the mix, then you can stop this song and move on to rehearsing. Like I said earlier, after a while, this should take only about 5 minutes so that you can get everybody up and going, and then you don't have to think about all the technical parts of mixing. Everybody can focus on the musical parts of playing their instrument or the musical parts of running the soundboard. When I'm running sound, I always like to have a set list on paper right beside me. That way I can jot down notes, I can see what's coming up next, and I don't miss any cues, or at least I don't have any excuse for missing cues because they were on paper right in front of me. I like to write down who's singing what song, and especially if it's in the middle of a song where the worship leader changes or somebody else takes the melody, I need to know that and write that down. I also want to know about any instrumental sections or interludes that might be highlighting an instrument as the primary instrument or the thing that people are paying attention to melodically. I also love mixing in tapped delay because that can highlight certain words or phrases in a song that can really make it feel really polished, and I love adding delay in that time. Those are really helpful things to know, and if I'm thinking about all the musical things, I'm not stuck in technical world. Another thing that I like to pay attention to is where are the quiet parts coming, especially if the mix needs to sound very in your face most of the time. Having those quiet sections and making sure that I'm pulling down the dynamics from the soundboard to compensate for that, to make sure that all the contrasts feel right between loud and quiet. Often people can tolerate a lot louder, a lot bigger feeling music if there are some quiet sections to go along with it. If I know where those are, and if I know where I need to be pulling down those faders, I can make that moment happen musically rather than reacting to it and saying, oh no, I gotta do something. And that's part of the goal, right? We want to be ahead of the game, not just reacting to what happens. We want to know what's going to happen before it happens. Another part that I'll write down is if there's any prayer or speaking parts in the middle of the service where I might need to duck down the effects on the vocals so it doesn't sound like somebody's talking in a cathedral. They can sound a little bit more natural for speaking versus singing. This system works really well for both sound techs and the band on stage to learn how to build their mixes and get it started in a way where we don't have to go back and fix things. We can just move on to the musical parts of the service, so then hopefully we can pay attention to the spiritual parts of the service. If you liked this video, be sure to check out my sound check checklist so that you can make sure that you're putting in all the things that you need to do to make sure that sound check goes smoothly. You can find a link to that down in the description below. So I want to hear from you. What's your method for running sound check? Do you have a system, or is it just a wing and a prayer? Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to hit subscribe, and there's some more videos over here. And remember, it's all about the low end. Avoid the sound tech solo, and nobody leaves church humming the kick drum. We'll see you back here next time on Attaway Audio.